Hello everyone and happy Friday. My name's Angela and today I am here to talk about batch processing in Mylio Photos. We're specifically going to be covering batch processing for your metadata edits, but there's also a few other things you can do in a batch in Mylio Photos like edits, and if we have time, we'll talk about those as well. Before we dive into today's topic, I do want to let you know about some of the other events we have coming up for you next week. As usual, we're going to have our Tuesday and Thursday live Q&As. You guys are always welcome to jump into those. Robin, I see that you were ready yesterday for the session and remembered it was Thursday. Well, on Thursdays at this same time, we also have live Q&A and you are always welcome to join those as well. And these are informal sessions where you can come in and just ask questions about anything photography related, Mylio Photos, family history, any of that stuff. All of it's on the table and I will do my best to help with whatever you guys have going on that, maybe is giving you a little trouble. So please feel free to join me for those on Tuesday and Thursday. On Fridays, we have these coffee breaks. Next week's session, by popular demand, we're going to be focusing on mobile. And a lot of you have asked me for different things on using the mobile app on your phones, and that's what we're going to dive into pretty much for the whole month of September for coffee breaks. So for those of you who are wanting to learn more about using Mylio Photos on your phone, making the best of the app in that format, you won't want to miss those sessions. Also, next Thursday, we're going to have a special webinar with Rich Harrington. He's our head of product, and he's going to be joining us to talk about creating a shared family library. If you are at all interested in the new family plans that are out, what that means, how you can transition to that, if it's right for you or not, please feel free to join this webinar. It's going to be a great informative session, and that's going to be at 9:30 a.m. Pacific on Thursday next week. With that, let's go ahead and jump into today's topic, which is batching like a boss, power user tricks for editing in bulk. We're going to go into editing metadata. And as you edit metadata, the thing you're going to come across is that doing it one photo at a time is super, super tedious. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of brain power, and it's just not fun to do it one at a time. Batch editing gives you speed and consistency and makes this process so much better. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing I want to bring up is when you are wanting to batch edit, the first thing you're going to want to do is filter your results, because if you start in the all photos view, you're going to have thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of images that you're looking at all at once. And while there might be a lot of overlap between those images, it's kind of hard to tell when you're looking at that many things. So I like to filter it down by specific folders personally. That's my top choice. But you can use file type, you can use dates. If you've already gone through and used Quick Review to add flags or stars, you can certainly filter down by that. But picking a specific folder and working with one group of images that are most likely all related, to me, is the best way to do this. So I like to use QuickFilters. So let's jump over into Mylio really quick, and I'm going to start here from the all photos view. Let me just go ahead and close up my panels so we can have a fresh view here. And you can see if I open up my info panel here on the right, I've got 126,000 media in my library. That is way too much to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and narrow this down to a specific folder that we want to go ahead and tag some stuff in and add metadata where it's needed. So I'm going to go over here to my left sidebar. You can either open up the sidebar here by clicking this arrow at the top, or you can click the little filter icon at the bottom. They're both going to get you into QuickFilters. And from here, you have all of these different ways to narrow down what you're looking at. For adding batch metadata, my favorite is going to be by folder, because I usually bring things in by date. And so everything on a specific date is usually in some way related. So let's go here by folder, and I'm going to go into my main photos folder here, and I can go to, let's see here. Let's just choose one here where I took some pictures of my cats, and it looks like I took some pictures in my garden. So there we go. We've got a bunch of images and they're all cats, and there's a lot of overlap between the images here that are in this top section. So that's what I mean by narrowing down. Pick a grouping of images that have something in common, and then you can go ahead and work with those. And this works for a lot of different areas in Mylio, whether you're doing dedupe or declutter or quick review or some other organization. Going in smaller chunks is always more manageable than going with the biggest grouping you can. So let's go ahead and start with that. So we've got our quick filters on. Next thing you're going to want to do is select the set of images that you want to make changes to. So if we look back here at this group of images, I've got some down here from my garden and near my house. And up here I have a bunch that are all cats. So I'm going to want to take the ones that are cats and I'm going to want to add specific things to those images. And same thing goes here for these ones of the garden. And so we can make changes to those different groupings. If I wanted to select everything in that folder, you can do on Windows, it's a Control-A keyboard shortcut, or on Mac, Command-A. So I go over here. If everything in this I wanted to add something to, I could do Command-A. I'm on a Mac, so Control-A if you're on Windows, and that selects everything. You can also, if you don't want to use a keyboard shortcut, you can always go down here to the Actions menu and do the same thing, select all, and that's going to give you the same experience. The next thing you want to know is how to select a range of images. And many of you probably already know this, but some of you might not know how to select certain things in a grouping. And this is usually going to be the same across your operating system. So this isn't unique to Mylio. This is going to work for you whether you're in your file system or you're in a spreadsheet or something else. Selecting a range is going to be to select the first item, and then you're going to hold down the Shift key on your keyboard and select the last item. So let's go ahead and go over here. I'm going to go ahead and deselect everything. And if all I want to select are the cats, I can select the first image, hold down the Shift key on my keyboard, and select the last image. And you'll see that I've only selected these top portion here, and that's because I'm using that Shift modifier, and that lets me select a range of images. Now, if you want to select non-contiguous images, that is where you're going to hold down on Windows, the Control key, on Mac, it's going to be the Command key. So again, if I want to come in here and say, I want to add something specific to this first, so there's a mixture of my two cats in here. So let's say I want to grab this first one here, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key and go to this one here. These are all Glenn Levitt, but there's a few others of Glenn down here at the bottom that I also want to grab to add something specific about him. So I can then hold down my Command key or Control on Windows and then select these ones as well. So this gives me a non-contiguous grouping. Contiguous means that they all flow together, so that's that range. Non-contiguous means there's a break in the middle and then you can select individual things that aren't necessarily in the same order. So those are your different selection tools on desktop. If you're on a touchscreen device, so your tablets, your phones, or even a touchscreen computer, there's a little bit different gestures you can use here. So when you tap something on your phone, that selects an individual image. On your phones inside of Mylio, if you do a long press on an image, that brings up the selection mode. And you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, there's going to be two buttons, one for range and then one for done. If you just keep range off, you can select multiple images, those non-contiguous ones. If you want to select a range of things like we did here at the top from here to here, you would click that range button, click the first one, and then click the last one, and you would get that range. So it works a little bit differently on mobile, and we'll go more in depth on that next week when we start getting in depth with the mobile workflow, but I did want to throw that out there for those of you who are working on touchscreen devices. So that's kind of an overview of how you select things in Mylio Photos. It's really simple stuff that most of you probably already know, but it's always a good refresher, especially when there's keyboard shortcuts that can help make it better. Once you've selected what you want to work with, that's when we can start making changes. So the best way to go about this is to open the info panel on the right and see which fields are available for batch editing. So there might be some fields that are hidden there, and that's because you can't edit those all at once, but just about everything as far as metadata goes can be done all at once. And then for places, you would just drag the selection onto the mini map there in the info panel. So let's take a look at that here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with these images, and I'm going to grab all of these cat photos, and we're going to do a few things with these images. So I'm going to go ahead and move that off the screen. And to start, you can see I have title, caption. I can even do file name. Now, file name is one that you probably want to be a little bit cautious with, because if you start doing a batch of file renaming, this is physically renaming those files on your computer. And if you have other applications that also watch this folder, let's say you have a Lightroom library and Mylio is also watching the same folder, by changing the file name here in Mylio, that's going to mess up your Lightroom catalog and cause things to become disconnected. So be cautious about doing things like changing the file name or physically moving things in the file system if that scenario is something that you have. You can go down here and you can batch add keywords. And you can modify the keywords that are on all of these different images. You can also go down here and check on your smart tags. These are the AI generated tags that Mylio adds. And you can decide which ones make sense and which ones don't. For instance, here with tiger cat, yeah, I don't think that really applies here. So I can click that X. And these are no longer going to be showing under a search for a smart tag of tiger cat. Same thing with Persian cat. These are not Persians. I can go ahead and take that off of there. They are orange for sure. They're animals. Some of them probably are blurry. The rest of those are fine, and so forth. Now under IPTC, I have my IPTC card set up and I've already applied this information and it already applies to all of these images, which is why this is here. So I can go ahead and leave that alone, or if I want to change something here, I can go ahead and add in these fields or make changes, and that change will apply to everything that's selected. Down here under categories, again, we can add categories to these entire images. I can go here to edit categories and say, these are all personal, and apply. And it's going to ask me to confirm because I'm changing something on 48 media. So I go ahead and hit set, and that's now added that personal category to all of my cat photos. If I had done a bunch of ignoring faces in here, I could rescan the faces of this entire batch and it's going to come up with any new faces that might be in there. I can also, if these are pictures from, say, a concert or some sort of group event where I took a lot of pictures, but I don't know anybody there, it was more about capturing the event than the actual people, and I don't want to tag all of those people, I can just say ignore untagged faces, and that will ignore all of the faces in that selected range. I can also add other people here, and this is really good for if you know you are at a specific event with a specific person and you want to add them and have these pictures show up in their collection inside of the people view. It doesn't tag a physical face in there, but that goes ahead and associates that particular picture with a particular person. So you can add that here, again, to everything you have selected. If we go down here to places, I can go ahead and drag these onto the little map, or I can expand this out. And these were taken at home because my cats don't like to go anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and put in Santee, California, which is the city I live in. And there's my city, and I can grab these pictures and I can then drag them to the map and move that around and get that to approximately where those need to be. So like right about there, and click OK. And now I've added GPS information to these images. You'll also see that these now have that little icon on there that shows that they have location information. So we go ahead and pop out of there, go down here to places, and you'll see that there's now information that's been filled in for each one of these images. And then finally we have our albums. If I wanted to take this group of images and add them all to an album, I can go here to plus. I can choose an album that already exists and hit continue and add them to an album all at once. So let's go ahead and do a few things with these particular pictures. I already put them on the map, and I don't necessarily want them all to have the same title and caption, but we can work with keywords. And you can see I've already added cat to all of these. I could also add something like home, and I could add, fluffy or something like that. And anyway, that's adding all of these keywords here to all of the selected images. Now, if I decide, I don't really want to have home in there as a keyword for these, I can click that X, and that's because these are still all selected, removing that keyword from all of the selected images. Moving on down to smart tags, I can go ahead and promote some of these smart tags up to actual keywords. The difference here when it comes to metadata between smart tags and keywords is that keywords are stored in your metadata. They're going to be in your XMP files, and they're going to travel with your pictures. Smart tags are Mylio only. You're not going to be able to see those smart tags in any other application. They're just residing in Mylio. But if you want to convert one of those smart tags into an actual keyword that sticks with that picture in the metadata, you just go ahead and click that check mark. And since all of these are selected and they're all saying they're all animals, I can check that box, and now all of these, all 48 of the images selected, now have the keyword animal. Again, we talked about IPTC. If I hadn't already added my IPTC info here, I could click that apply IPTC card, and again, it would add my copyright information to all of those pictures. If you're not seeing the IPTC section and you want to, you can enable it here under settings, and I think it's under, is it under organization? Nope, under advanced. Yep, IPTC info right there. So turn on IPTC info, fill out the information here, and then you can go ahead and load that as a card on your images when it's appropriate. We talked a little bit about categories and about people. If I want to do the non-contiguous thing here and I want to add people for each one of these pictures, I do like to face tag my cats. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and deselect those, and then I want to select just the ones here of Glenn Levitt. There we go. Get those all selected. And this is also a really great thing to do with documents, with pets, because the facial recognition is really iffy with pet faces. So we can go here to other people and I can type in Glenn Levitt. There he is. And I've now added his tag, and all of these pictures are going to show up when I go to his person card in the people view. I can do the same thing here with these ones for McAllen, and let's go ahead and tag him as well. So there we go. And we've just added those associations to, you know, how many images is this? That this is, if we scroll up here to the top, 48 selected images. So that's pretty good. We already added our place, and then I don't really want to put these in an album, but I totally could. I could have a cat's album and put all of my cat pictures into a specific album. So that gives you an idea of what you can do and how fast you can do it here in the info panel. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is you can also set and alter the date for a range of images. And this is really helpful when you're working with scanned photos especially. So if you have a bunch of scanned images that you want to mark for later to work on, maybe you don't know what date they are, but you know that they weren't the date that you scanned them, you can go in here to the More menu and just mark them all as undated. Or maybe you're traveling and you forgot to change the time and date settings on your camera. Maybe you live in California and you just recently went to Europe. So you have, maybe a 9-hour difference between what your camera says was the timestamp and what it actually was. You can go in here and just do a shift. And this lets you shift it by a certain number of days, minutes, hours, or seconds. And I think that's really helpful in the scenario of travel. I know that that's happened to me, and those, it's nice to be able to shift those really, really easily in a whole batch. All right, so from here, nobody's asking, by chance a Scotch person? Yes, I do happen to enjoy a good wee dram of Scotch every now and again. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the metadata rules for how it applies when you have other information filling the fields in some of those pictures. So if I go in here and perhaps maybe I had a couple of these, let me just go ahead and type in here McAllen. And I go ahead and I select all of these images and I want to do something. You'll see, even though one of these had a title, this now shows as empty. If I were to go ahead and type something in here, it's going to overwrite in this field, in the caption field, and so forth. It's going to overwrite any information I had previously added and add that new information. So that's something you want to be aware of. When you have an open text field, if you type in new content, it's going to replace the content for all of the selected images. With things like keywords and categories, it adds the new info without removing the existing data. So it's going to append to that category as opposed to taking anything away. So if I go in and want to add something else to these, if I go down and add a new keyword, it's not going to overwrite any of my earlier keywords, but I can, if I need to, I can remove an earlier keyword if I need to, but it's not going to overwrite anything. When you do places, if you take an entire group of images and maybe one of those images had already been assigned a place, again, it's going to overwrite that information and give it that new location information. And same goes with your ratings, labels, and flags. If you had previously, and each one of those is separate, if you've already given it a red label and you switched a grouping to a blue label, that's going to now have a blue label. If you had previously set all of these things to 1 and 2 stars and you went and gave it a 3, those are all now going to be 3 stars. And with your flags, if you previously hadn't flagged anything and marked it as a pick, then all of those will be picks. If you previously marked one as a reject and you marked it as a pick, it will now be a pick. So again, that applies to all of the selected items. Are there any questions on that? I just want to make sure that that part is clear and easily understood. It looks like there's a couple of things here in the chat. Ted and Lucine, is a keyword the same as a tag? That is, does it function identically? So a keyword, those are terms that are often used interchangeably. In Mylio Photos, Keywords are separate from smart tags. There's nothing called just a tag in Mylio Photos. That's kind of a generic term. That can be a face tag, it can be a keyword, it can be a smart tag. There's lots of different, let's say lowercase t tags. But in Mylio Photos specifically, we have keywords, and these are going to be stored in your metadata in the XMP file that travels with your pictures. And smart tags are going to be in the database and the catalog for Mylio only. These are just for use in Mylio. They don't travel with your images, but you can promote them to keywords and make them a more permanent thing. All right, let's see here. Michael says, if you accidentally set faces to ignore and did not want to, is there a way to view all ignored people in photos? Not that I know of, but you can, if you accidentally set something to ignore, you can always go back in here. So if you have a group of images that you want to rescan, you can go here to rescan faces here under people, or simply right click on it and choose rescan faces. There is also one here for smart tags. So if you go into your smart tags and you decide to take off all of these different smart tags, you're like, I don't want any of those there. And then later on you decide, you know what, I do want the AI to scan these and make that searchable. You can right click on these and say rescan smart tags, and those will come back. All right, I think we got all those questions there. So let's go ahead and jump back over to the presentation and talk about some real world workflows. So some of the ways that this can be useful is if you have an entire folder of images that you scanned in. These are your family history photos. They might be your pictures, your parents, your grandparents, and you want to take all of those pictures and you want to add the category of family history. Maybe you're sharing your library with other people. Maybe you just want to have that segmented in your library. You can go over here to Mylio, and in my case, I'm going to go to the folders view for this. And I have a family history folder. I can go here to my tap to categorize. Again, this is another form of batch processing. And I can go over here and make sure that family history is checked. I also have it marked as family. And you can do that for an entire folder of images. You can do that also the way that I showed you in All Photos view, filter to a folder, select all. You can do it that way as well. But sometimes for certain things, especially if it applies to everything in that folder, it's easier to go ahead and add that information folder by folder than having to go picture by picture. Another thing you could do is tag everything from a particular vacation with specific keywords and locations. So let me go ahead and I'm going to jump back to some pictures that I took on a trip. Let's see here. Let's go down to my photos. And this was last year. And last year I went to the Eastern Sierras and I went to Mammoth. So Mammoth Lakes is one of those beautiful, beautiful places. And you can see I don't have a lot of, I don't think I've added actually any location information to any of these images. So let's go ahead and start with these ones here. I'm going to go from here. Actually, let's do this one here. These were earlier in the day, a different location. So I'm going to go ahead and drag up to the top here, grab those. And these were all at sunset, twilight, and they were up at Mammoth Lakes at a very similar location. They're basically taken from two sides of the road. One's looking out east, one of them is looking west. So let's go ahead and add some information here that applies to all of these. All of these are Eastern Sierras, and you can see that some of these have Eastern Sierras, but not all of them. So I can add the check mark, and that's going to apply that keyword then to everything. They're all also autumn and mammoth and fall. And what else can I add here? I can say sunset. I can say twilight. And there we go. I've added now keywords that apply to everything that I have selected. I can go down, and if I want to, I can bring up some of the other stuff here. I can say, you know what, none of these have a black swan in them, so I can check that off, get rid of that. There are, I think there is a boathouse in there somewhere. I don't think there's any people in here, so not smiling is not relevant. So I'm going to check that one, get that out of there. And there's not really any suspension bridges in there either. The rest of those I think are just fine. And then I can come down here to the map and pull this out. So I'm going to go here to Mammoth Lakes, and that's in California. There we go. Pop that onto my map, and I'm going to zoom in here and get in a little tighter on this area and go up the mountain here a little bit. And we're going to get up to, let's see here. I'm trying to figure out where these are. Let's see here. I'm trying to remember where exactly these lakes hang out, because I'm looking at the ski lifts right now. All right, let's just go ahead and drag these onto the map in kind of a general area. I'll look up the actual location later. I can just pick up these up and drag them over. If you're not, if you're on, you know what you also can do? So you can click and drag and drop them, and then move this tag around and then say okay. I'm going to go ahead and take that off of there. If you also want to just do something very precise, let's say you zoomed way in, you found the exact location, you can just right click on the map, and that's going to drop those on there as well. And then again, you click the little check mark that accepts it, and it'll apply that location to all of those. So again, going through and adding tags to your vacation photos, I think is probably one of the easiest and most high payoff things you can do, because those are things that you're going to remember and probably want to look back on. So adding a handful of well thought out keywords to the big picture, adding them to the map if they're not already GPS marked from your phone, adding that kind of information makes them so much easier to find. And then later on, what I'll do is things that I've gone in and edited, that I might take the time to add a caption and a title to. So that's when I add that kind of stuff. I really only add titles and captions when there's a story that's relevant, or maybe it's one of my fine art pieces that I want to put in my portfolio or something like that. All right, and then let's see, there was one other example here. When you're working on specific projects, let's say you have a bunch of images that you want to edit, or maybe they're already edited and you want to print. Color labels are a really good thing to use for this, and color labels can basically be assigned to whatever tasks you want. What I recommend is, if you decide you want to go down this path, make a note for yourself that, let's say the blue color label means to print, and the green color label means to edit. So for me, as I'm going through and culling my images, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll add a pick flag to images that I want to give more time to. So I can go in here to this, and I can filter, go up here to the top. Actually, let's go ahead and turn on my filters, not my navigation. So I'm going to go here to rating label and flag and say find all of my picks. Now from here I can say, okay, these are all my picks, and I want to give more attention to this one, this one, this one, and this one. So I want to add a color label of green to tell me that I need to go back and edit these later. So I'm going to go over here to my ratings, labels, and flags, and I can say give these a green color label. You can see the little green label that just popped up. And that can be a sign for me that I need to go ahead and do some editing. And then the ones that I've already edited and I know I really like, I can go ahead and take those and I can say give those the blue color label, and that's going to go ahead and tell me later on that these are ready to print should I choose to do that. So those are just some different ways you can use color labels. And again, make use of selecting multiple things at once. Don't go item by item. You're going to make your life a lot harder if you try to go one thing at a time, unless you have a really small group of images. You can do that if you like, but to me that's pretty tedious. I'd much rather kind of do big picture and those kind of that low-hanging fruit that's really easy to get. I like to go ahead and get that stuff out of the way, and then I can do details on certain things later on. So a few things to think about here. If you have a set of quick filters that you've set up to narrow down your list that you're working on and you want to save that for later and be able to come back to it, you can save that as a quick collection. So let me pop over here, and let's say I've got things that are picked and I'm working in, let's see, I'm already in a folder, so I've got a folder selected and I want to go, okay, let's just go with that. I can say go up here to my quick filters and go into my quick collection, save as a new quick collection, and say this is my working group for, to review, or in process organization, whatever you want to do. Also keep in mind that there's a few in here that are really helpful. This one needs to organize is built in. You don't have to create that one yourself. So from the all photos view, if you go here to need to organize, this is really a great starting point because it's everything from the last 90 days, 0 stars and unflagged. So that tells you these need attention. So that's another way that you can get to a group. But quick collections are very, very useful. If you are adding metadata to things, you do have the option to undo. Don't wait too long. It's not going to be there forever. But if it's the last thing that you did in the application, you do a Command or Control Z, which is the keyboard shortcut for undo, and undo that change. I believe you can also go up here to the edit menu and choose undo. I can undo that blue label that I did, and that's going to undo that last step that I just added. So you do have the option to undo most metadata changes like this that you do in batch. And then finally, don't forget about batch face tagging. This is probably a bigger topic for its own session, but you can always go in and batch face tag. So I showed you how to associate pictures in batch with a certain person, but don't forget over here under tools, you have your batch face tagging. And I don't have any pictures of people in that particular folder, which is why nothing's coming up. If I go back over here to my all photos, pull out of that there and go back to my batch face tagging. There we go. And from here, I can work through images. Those are my Aunt Connie. I'm not sure about that. I think that's Dolores. That's definitely my Aunt Cindy. I'm not sure about that. Not sure about that. And yep, that's great grandpa. So there we go. I've gone in and I've batch edited a handful of pictures. And again, doing more than one at one time, just makes things go so much faster and so much better. Another thing we didn't get into very much, actually we didn't get into it all today, is visual edits. And you can batch visual edit in Mylio Photos. So for instance, if I wanted to take these cat pictures here, let me go ahead and grab those. And I go over here to my edit, or I can go down here just to my auto edit tools here. I can say auto enhance on those images, and that's going to auto enhance all of those. So there's minimal things you can do. You can add presets to a group of images, or if you take one image here and let's see if it'll let me. This is one from my iPhone, so sometimes it doesn't like to let me edit iPhone pictures. Yep. Let me go to something that I know will work. All right, let's go down here and say I have all these images. They're all roughly the same. And I want to go ahead and edit this one. So let's pull down the highlights and pull up the shadows a little bit, give this some clarity. And maybe we want to add a little bit of vibrance, but maybe back off the saturation. Okay, so say you got a list of edits here that you like. If you go down to the bottom of your edits and go to the edit section here, you can copy that. And then I can go back to my grid. I can grab all of these other ones here and I can paste. And that pastes those edits across to all of those other images. So there's so many different things in Mylio that you can do that'll speed up your workflow, and you don't have to do repetitive stuff over and over and over. You can automate a lot of that with batch processing, and it's going to make your workflow feel much lighter and much easier. So what I want to recommend for you is to try this yourself. Use QuickFilters to isolate a folder or a date range. Basically just narrow it down, get to a manageable group of images that you want to work with. Select either all or a portion of that narrowed down group and open up the info panel and edit 2 to 3 fields. Drag them onto the map if they don't already have a location, add a couple of relevant keywords, and if you desire, add a title, associate them with a person. Whatever other data you think is going to help you find these in the future, that's the information that you want to add, because AI is wonderful and it can help us find a lot of stuff in our library, but the additional details that we add ourselves, that's the way we personally think. And that is how you're going to find things later on, because the AI might get it right, but it might not think the way that you do. So I do recommend adding as much metadata as you can muster in these different, as you go through this. So just a quick reminder that next week we've got lots of stuff for you. We have our usual Q&A sessions on Tuesday and Thursday. You guys are always welcome to join in and ask your questions. Friday's coffee break next week will be starting our month of mobile. And we're going to be talking about mastering the Mylio experience. So basically just some gestures and getting around and where to find things that you're used to finding on the computer, how to find those things on your mobile devices. That will be next Friday. We're also going to have a special webinar next Thursday with Rich Harrington, our head of product, to talk about creating a shared family library. So if you're interested in sharing your library with your spouse, with your kids, perhaps extended family, you're going to get a look at what that can do, what that involves, and be able to determine if it's the right step for you. Just to let you know, if you've been with us for a while and you've been a Mylio customer, there are upgrade paths. So don't be scared off by the price point. That if you go to the website and you see what the price is for a family plan, if you are an existing Mylio customer, we have a path for you that's going to be a little bit more manageable. So if you're interested, come check out that webinar and learn a little bit more and see if it's a good fit. With that, I want to wish you guys a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.